Good morning. We're going to begin as usual. Morning, Karen. We're going to begin as usual with some meditation. So sit comfortably as much as you can. Relax your body and mind. Watch your breathing. I find something useful. Sometimes just watching very carefully, see if you can recognize your heartbeat. I don't know, anyone? That's the kind of state of mind. You can't control your heartbeat generally. Maybe someone with very high powers could. The same way you just want to watch your breathing. And once you've watched it and recognized it, keep it in mind. Apply the mental factor mindfulness. Just as the general instructions about tranquil abiding, shamatha, you need to have a mind of introspection to watch if excitement or laxity are occurring. Here, you have to use introspection to watch if you're multitasking, if your mind is following some other thought. And if it is, let go of that. Bring your attention back to the breathing. Now, if you've had some success, bring your attention to the mental consciousness, its contents, or if you're already familiar, recognizing the substratum of the mind, the nature of the mind within which this thoughts and images are arising, the clear light nature, conventional clear light nature of your mind. If intervening thoughts arise now, they're more easily observable than when watching the breathing, because you're focusing on a clear vacuity, the mind's lack of providing any obstructing contact to thoughts. It doesn't hinder their arisal. It doesn't prevent them from leaving. It's not like molasses where if a little fly or bug gets caught in it, it's hard to extricate itself from the molasses. The mind is not like that. Recalling this is what is called the developmental Buddha nature, conventional Buddha nature. It's analogous to the non-abiding or ultimate Buddha nature, the emptiness of the mind, which is the looking at the ultimate nature of the mind. Here we're looking at the conventional clear light nature of the mind. This can give us confidence that we can develop the good qualities, that which we would like to develop, and we can get rid of faults that we have. They are not part and parcel of our mind. They are transient. Besides the fact, watching the clear light nature of the mind provides us with an object of single-pointed concentration, calming the mind. Our opportunity to do this now is because we have a life of leisure and endowment. We have leisure. We're free from the unfree states, being born in hell, and animals, and hungry ghosts, long life gods, and so forth. We're not barbarians, hopefully. And we have the 10 richnesses or endowments, some from our own side, some due to our own karma, some from collective karma. The Buddha's teaching, the Buddha has arisen in the world in recent times. 2,500 years ago, those teachings still exist. They're still followed. It's a community of like-minded practitioners to support us, benefactors. All of that was bestowed upon us by the ripening of our karma in the past. We practiced virtue in the past to such a degree that we've come up with this very rare opportunity of having a life as a human with all of these leisures and endowments. But it is transient, it's impermanent. As we're getting older, we begin to feel more directly, more intimation that death is just around the corner. Anyone who's right here with us now, even the youngest, maybe has 65, 70 years more at the most. Some of us maybe a lot less. But this life having this nature with a developmental Buddha nature as our, our very nature, we can develop all the good qualities. We can leave imprints in our mind, instincts, so that in future lives we have a running start, so to speak. The greatest imprint that we can leave, besides renunciation and emptiness, is the bodhicitta, which is the essential element of the Mahayana path. Without it, no matter how much wisdom or renunciation you have, there's no way to achieve enlightenment. There's no way to enter the bodhisattva path. And bodhicitta, development of bodhicitta, depends not only on the blessings of the Buddha, their teachings, but on sentient beings, all of whom have been our mother numberless times in the past. Our present mother has been our mother numberless times. She's been depthlessly kind, giving us our body, our enjoyments, food, teaching us, protecting us. And each and every sentient being has been just as kind, depthlessly kind. There's only a difference of the time. Right now, our mother of this lifetime, we remember if she's passed away. But there's no difference in the kindness. As Atisha would look out at the cows grazing in the fields around his room, he would be heard to murmur under his breath, "Mother." All these living beings are suffering under the influence of the klesha, the delusions, principally the grasping to inherent existence, ego grasping. With a sense of responsibility to alleviate their suffering out of compassion, remembering their kindness, and to set them into stable, lasting happiness. We recognize that right now we're not even able to provide that for ourselves, let alone to guide others. It wouldn't be enough simply to have renunciation or some little compassion or wisdom to be able to impart to others, although that's helpful. To really help sentient beings, we have to achieve enlightenment, which we recognize is possible. Is enlightenment possible? Yes. We ourselves could achieve that state from which we could really authentically lead other people out of suffering, knowing exactly what our instructions would bring about in their minds according to their inclinations, their karmic instincts, their appreciation, what they admire. Think, I must achieve enlightenment for the sake of all other sentient beings. It's not sufficient I just find liberation for myself alone, leaving all of these kind mother sentient beings to fend for themselves. Of course, there's numberless Buddhas, You might think, oh, it doesn't matter if I achieve enlightenment. There's the Buddhists will take care of them if I achieve liberation. But there are sentient beings who have a karmic connection with us personally, who we can more quickly lead to enlightenment than other manifestations of the Buddha if we were to achieve enlightenment. To that end, we need to understand the mind in order to meditate and achieve enlightenment. And the class today on mind and mental factors is a prime example of that. I think I'm going to listen attentively with a fresh mind, critical mind, wise mind, listen, contemplate, meditate, to better understand the mind in order to achieve enlightenment for the sake of all sentient beings. With that altruistic intention, try to set a motivation. I'm going to listen to the teachings in order to become a Guru Buddha, teaching Buddha, manifesting in the world for the sake of all sentient beings. And then bring your attention back to the present, the here and now. Which side am I supposed to go here? This way. There we go, more centered. How are you doing? Any question? Any questions from last time? Any observations? Christine.
It's a simple question. What does auto commentary mean, and how does it differ from self commentary?
Say different ways of translating the same thing. So many authors wrote texts that were very brief, like the Abhidharma Kosha, the text we talk about, or the Abhidharma Samuchaya. They were written in verses, and so there's not a lot of explanation. But they themselves, authors, would write commentaries about their shorter texts. The reason for the shorter text is that it's easy to memorize. They're verses, like placing stones in a fence. We call them root text. The commentaries to those elaborate what the meaning of the words are, which are sometimes obscure, just like there's one of my teachers in Italy, Geshe Jampagazzo, used to say that Lama Yeshe, when he was in the debating courtyard when he was young at Sera in Tibet, he would quote some verse, some words from one of the verses of the Abhidharma Kosha, like in the sixth there are four. Out of context, you don't know what in the sixth what, there are four what. And one would only know, sort of be familiar with that if you had received commentary. So commentaries are of two kinds. Commentaries that are written by the author who composed the root text, and commentaries that were composed by other authors. So the commentaries that are written by the original author are called self-commentaries or auto commentaries. So we call it the Abhidharma Kosha, Karikas, that means the verses. Karika means verses. The Abhidharma Kosha Bhasham. Bhasham means auto commentary. There's other words for just regular commentary. Some other author wrote, like Chandrakirti wrote a commentary to Nagarjuna's fundamental wisdom. That's not called an auto commentary because the original text was written by Nagarjuna. It's not called a self-commentary, an auto commentary. So auto commentary and self-commentary mean the same thing. Is okay? Yeah, okay. Good question. Anyone else have a thought? Question? Okay, so we've got our full crew here. So we were just, at last time, we've gone through many of the 51 mental factors, 5 omnipresent, 5 object ascertaining, 11 virtuous, the 6 root afflictions or 6 root delusions. Now we're talking about the 20 secondary afflictions. And we've gotten up to the 5th one in our list here. Different ways of enumerating these, because, for instance, as I mentioned before, in Geshe Repton's book, he groups them according to which root delusion they are related to. So at the beginning, he says, afflictions derived from anger, wrath, vengeance, spite, envy, cruelty, or we call here jealousy, envy, jealousy. So these are all related with anger. And we had in our list, we had something else which was not related. What was that? Concealment. That's not related with anger, right? So the reason why that enumeration exists, I don't know. You know why it's sort of the traditional enumeration with concealment in there. Now we're talking about jealousy or envy. And I ended last time asking you about what you felt envy or jealousy meant. What do you think, Louis? When we use it in everyday life, when you're jealous of someone, what does that mean?
The way I look at it, it means you're jealous of something they have done, of something they possess, not necessarily of the person themselves is just the center of whatever it is you're jealous of. So an accomplishment or...
If you have a friend that you're very close to, your buddy or your girlfriend or your wife or someone, and someone else starts to develop their affection, you know, that your wife or girlfriend or whatever develops affection or interest in them. So where is your jealousy pointed? At your wife? You say, I'm jealous of my wife, or I'm jealous of the other guy, or what?
I would point to the other guy.
Yeah, you're not jealous at your wife.
No.
You're jealous of the person. So here it says, what is jealousy? It is a deep disturbance of the mind that cannot tolerate another's marvelous attributes. Here it could be that the marvelous attributes, if we're just talking about this common usage in terms of relationships, that the attribute of having your wife's interest or affection or something. But it can be other things. You can be jealous that they're famous or they're rich or something like that. We cannot tolerate another's marvelous attributes due to excessive attachment to gain and honor, and it is involved with hatred. It has the function of causing mental unhappiness and not abiding in contact with happiness. So as it said, it's a deep disturbance of the mind that cannot bear another's success due to attachment to gain and honor. It produces serious, undesirable consequences in both this and future worlds. When it says future worlds, it means future lifetimes, future rebirths, right? And in this life, there will be mental unhappiness, and in future lives, one will be impelled into bad migrations. So when we talked about the root afflictions, we talked about their antidotes a little bit. What's the antidote to jealousy? Karen, do you know? Antidote to jealousy?
Is it delight? Like you delight for somebody else instead of getting jealous? Is that the antidote?
So let's use the example of the relationship jealousy, although we can be jealous of people being wealthy and so forth. So what would you delight in?
No, I wouldn't delight in that, but I would, but I would say, well, I want their happiness. And if I really want them to be happy, then and maybe that would work. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, generally in the Lan Rim, Bob, you know what in the Lan Rim, what's generally considered to be the antidote to jealousy?
I don't know. It's escaping my mind at the moment.
Oh, Nadine knows.
I think it's rejoicing.
Yeah, rejoicing. Generally, we say rejoicing.
Is that different than delight, Venerable George? I guess that's what
Well,
I was thinking when I said delight.
yeah, so
there a
like in the
difference?
seven limb puja, we talk about the seven limbs, right? Prostration, offering, confession, rejoicing, right? Asking the Buddha's remain to turn the Dharma wheel and dedicating to enlightenment. So rejoicing, Jesu Yirang in Tibetan. Alex, have you learned enough Tibetan to know that expression, Jesu Yirang? You haven't heard that?
Definitely in a prayer I read, but
Yeah. Rejoice in the virtues of others, or in the happiness of others. So there's two kinds of rejoicing. You can rejoice in others' happiness, which is the particular antidote to jealousy here. Thinking, oh, that's good that they're wealthy, that they are more popular than I. We are exactly the same, wanting to be happy and be free of suffering. And as a proto-bodhisattva, I'm working for their benefit, so rejoice in that. The other kind of rejoicing is in the seven limb puja rejoicing. That's rejoicing in the virtuous actions of others. So when others give charity, they're generous, when they do actions that are beneficial, we rejoice in those actions. And say if they make 100,000 prostrations, or if they meditate for many years, or they have some kind of activity that is very inspiring, we rejoicing in that rather than feeling resentment or jealousy creates the same amount of merit as that person if they're on the same level as we are spiritually. We create more merit than they if they are on a lower level than us. And if the person we're rejoicing in, like the Buddhas or Bodhisattvas or Lama Zopa or the Dalai Lama, if they are higher than us, we create some portion of the merit that they're creating. So generally, this kind of antidote to this jealousy is not so much the rejoicing in the virtuous actions of the other person, but rejoicing in their happiness, their good qualities, which are the result of karma. If you can go back and think they are experiencing this success, this wealth, and so forth as a result of their actions in the past, that they've created virtue in the past, then you have both kinds of rejoicing. Okay, so then miserliness. What's another word for miserliness? Avarice? Is that the same thing? What do we call him?
Stinginess.
What? Say again?
Stinginess.
Emptiness.
Stingy. S-T-I-N-G.
Oh, stinginess. Is that what you're saying? Stinginess, right? Stinginess, right? So here, this text, Geshe-Raptin's text says avarice. So miserliness, avarice, stinginess. What is miserliness? It is a thorough holding of the mind to possessions, holding the mind thoroughly holding the mind to possessions due to excessive attachment to gain and honor, and is involved with attachment. It has the function of acting as a support for non-diminishment of possessions. What does that mean? It has the function of acting as support for non-diminishment of possessions. Think about it.
Well, it means you can't lose possessions if you're not attached to them and if you haven't hoarded them.
Well, if you're hoarding them, if you have miserliness or stinginess, it means that your possessions are not going to be diminished because you're not giving them away, right? That's the point. Just as been said above, it's a tight holding that is unable to let go of possessions through the force of attachment to gain and honor. It produces serious, undesirable consequences in both this and in future lives. There's a quotation from the Moonlamp Sutra: the body which is rotting away, as well as one's life force, waver helplessly. The childish are attached to dreamlike illusions. Thus, committing extremely evil actions, they come under the power of misdeeds. The unwise depart, mounted on the Lord of Death. They proceed to hell and undurable minds. So, thinking, one of the antidotes to miserliness is just realizing that you can't take things with you. Not only the fact that they are impermanent now, they're going to decrease even if you keep them, that they're uncertain. The stock market goes up, you're happy, and then you realize the stock market has gone down. And of course, they're not, even the possessions themselves don't bring real happiness. There's just an illusion of that. In Janagarbha's Dharanis that accomplish infinite doors, Janagarbha was one of the great, the Svatantrika Madhyamika teachers, founders. Sentient beings who get into a fight hold tightly to the basis of the quarrel. If they were to abandon that for which they have craving, and also abandon craving, they will attain a dharani. What is a dharani? Is that a kind of biscuit, or what? What is a dharani? Sounds like some kind of ice cream cone or something.
A level of realization.
What was that?
A level of realization.
A level of realization. So dharani, like when we talk about Dara, Vajra Dara, the holder of the Vajra, Dara, also the root of Dara is Dar, which is like Dharma, that which holds up. So Dara means to hold. Dharanis are, one sense of dharani is like mantras, long mantras, like the long mantra of Avalokiteshvara. Shankar, do you recite the long mantra of Avalokiteshvara?
Yes, sometimes.
Well, how does it start?
Namo Bhagavate. Oh no, that's it. I'm sorry.
Namo Ratnatrayaya.
Namo Ratnatraya. Namo.
So that's actually called the long dharani. So it helps you hold some understanding. So the beginning of it is holding understanding of refuge and in the Buddha Dharma Sangha and so forth, the Arya beings. And the last part, Dara Dara Diri Diri, holds the meaning of the various stages of the in Kriya Tantra, how you generate the deity. So dharanis have some kind of connection, sort of like, what would we call it? Mnemonic device, would we call it in the West? Something that you can sort of short that reminds you of the meaning of something else. Okay, we'll go into more detail about miserliness. What's the antidote to miserliness?
Renunciation.
Generosity.
Generosity. And Christine, what were you going to say?
Yeah, generosity.
So what is generosity? It just means giving. If you talk about the perfection of generosity, what is generosity? Nadine, do you know?
It's joy and giving, joyful giving.
Yeah, it's a mind. Generosity is a mind which is happy to give. So when the bodhisattvas, if someone asks a bodhisattva, "Can I have your arm?" "Oh yeah, here, take." So if we can develop that, and of course that's important to develop. Like in the Lama Chopa, when it talks about, please grant me blessings to generate joy in giving without any impediment. Right now we feel some impediment. There's a time to be generous, and there's a time to be, like Shantideva says in the Bodhisattva Charyottara, at the beginning, the Lord, the Bhagavan, the Buddha, taught us to give rice and vegetables, meaning, to the poor, give food. It is not appropriate at the beginning to give your body, but by practicing generosity, you can get to the point when you have bodhicitta and you have some understanding of emptiness, you can actually give your life for others without any hesitation, and it won't damage your mind. Right now, to give your life for others, there might be some disappointment or regret at the end, and that's not the right time to do that. Okay, so now we have two that are kind of similar. We call them, here it's translated as deceit and dissimulation. I think even in the popular politics, people talk about dissimulation. What does dissimulation mean? Does anyone know? Doris.
Is it kind of like hedging?
Yeah, kind of lying, not telling the exact truth. Do you ever have you heard that word? Stephen, have you heard dissimulation? David?
I have, Venerable George.
Yeah. David, have you heard? No. Okay. Ida, you ever hear that word?
Yes, actually, yes, but in Spanish, and it pretty much has the same meaning. You avoid showing the truth.
Oh, okay. How do you say it in Spanish?
Disimulación.
There you go. Okay. So here first, before dissimulation, we have in Tibetan gyu, deceit. Here, the way that's translated here is deceit. Let's see. Bewilderment, concealment, forgetfulness. I think here, not sure. In Geshe Repton's text, conscientiousness. I'm looking at her bewilderness, forgetfulness, pretension. What does he call pretension? Yeah, he calls them pretension and dishonesty. So gyu, deceit here, pretension. Like it says, what is deceit or pretension? It is a display of what is not one's good quality. That's kind of pretension, right? Pretentious. It is the display of what is not one's good quality due to excessive attachment to gain and honor, and is involved with attachment and ignorance. It has the function of acting as a support for wrong livelihood. Do you know what that means? Support for wrong livelihood?
Well, in modern slang, we call that a poser.
There you go. Good. Yeah. Posing. You could call this deceit, or what did I call pretension or posing? Okay. So the famous Geshe, now his name escapes me. One of you will remember, who used to put white stones down when he did a virtuous action, black stones down. What was his name, Bob, from the Lamrim teachings? Geshe, Nadine knows.
Geshe Ben
Gunga. Ben Gunga, right. So Ben Gunga, he recognized that when he heard a patron was coming, a wealthy person, and he cleaned up his room, and he put the altar all clean. Usually it was a mess, right? And then he realized that he was acting out of deceit or pretension or posing, so that if the benefactor saw his room and altar, that they might be, oh, this is a real practitioner. So what did he do? Does anyone know? Nadine knows these stories. Shanka, what did he do?
He threw ashes, I think, all over the room and the altar, right?
Right. He said, "Oh, what am I doing?" So as to not appear pretentious or posing or deceitful.
But I always thought that when I was reading that passage in the Lam Rim, I always thought, like, isn't the first one of the first things it talks about in the Lam Rim under how to practice is keeping an altar clean? I mean, at least you're really unclean, but altar always has to be clean, right? If you're a
Right. Right. But if your tendency is to be lazy and it's not clean, but when others are coming for the sole purpose of impressing them, you could say, oh, look, I'm so lazy, but they'll have a bad feeling about the Dharma and the Sangha or Dharma practitioners. So you clean up a little bit. That would be, I don't think that would be deceit. Deceit would be when you try to, as Lorraine said, posing, As said above, it is a display of good qualities that one does not actually possess due to excessive attachment to gain and honor, as in the case of pretending to be peaceful and subdued with the thought to deceive others, even though one's own mind is far from being subdued. The Five Aggregates by Vasubandhu, the text we've mentioned several times that you might find a translation of, there's a quotation that says, displaying the unreal, that which is unreal to deceive others. So, yeah. So this is in Geshe Repton's book, it says, afflictions derive from both attachment and bewilderment or ignorance. So, oh, wait. Is that right? Inconsideration of others, unconscious distraction, externals. No, I'm in the wrong section. Forgetfulness. What did I just call it? Pretension, right? Self-satisfaction, excitement. Okay, I've lost the place where it was. Pretension. Afflictions derived from both attachment and bewilderment, right? Pretension. The great exposition of the sages of the path, Lanrim Chemo explains it similarly. Deceit or pretension or posing is specified as acting as a support for wrong livelihood. If you're trying to impress others that will support you, that's called wrong livelihood. Because apart from being a method to practice wrong livelihood, a pretentious mind toward others is worthless. Wrong livelihood is of 5 types: pretension, flattery, hinting, extortion, seeking gain from gain. Have you heard this before? David, have you heard that before? 5 wrong livelihoods.
Yeah, I'm
Pardon?
not sure about the seeking gain from gain. I'm not sure what that means.
You
The other ones,
you give a little in anticipation that others will, you bring a present in anticipation that others will give you a bigger present, seeking gain from gain. So here, pretension is explained above, an external pretense toward others, posing toward others, feigning good qualities one does not have. That makes sense, right? With the thought in mind that you will receive some gain from that, or not necessarily physical gain, some honor. They will flatter you. Flattery is to speak smooth words in conformity with the minds of others for the sake of gain and honor. Do we recognize that in the world? When there's a big patron, oh, you are so great. You've been a great patron, and so forth and so on. Yeah, Lewis.
I was going to say, you asked, or you may have heard that before. It's one of the Bodhisattva vows. I will not accept material that has been by myself or others to one of the 5 wrong livelihoods.
Right.
Then it lists the 5 livelihoods.
So if you check the Bodhisattva vows, this is the secondary vows, right?
Yeah.
So if you check that, you'll find this. So this is important to know. Hinting is to flatter others and then praise their possessions out of attachment to gain. So what would be an example of that? Anyone have an idea?
Well, I mean, something like where you say, oh, that, I don't know, that necklace or whatever is so beautiful. And you just go on and on and on about it. Hopefully it's somebody, that person will give it to you or give you
Right.
something similar or whatever. Yeah.
Right.
Which
You
is
know-
stealing, which is also stealing, right?
Yeah. So saying, that would be something like that would be so useful for a Dharma practitioner, that kind of tape recorder, or, that kind of, hinting and giving a basis for that person to think, oh, I should give that to them. In China, anyone here? We don't have anyone who's Chinese directly. Anyone been to China or Singapore or these? In those countries, if you even express some admiration about something, they feel an obligation to give it to you. Once when I was in Taiwan, one monk had these, they were actually photocopied books, books from the library that were photocopied, and they're so skillful in Taiwan, they can make a book even with sewing. The binding is sewn and everything with a leather cover. It was the Madhyamaka Bhasham, the auto commentary by Chandrakirti. There's Madhyamaka. And I just said, "Oh, this is so great." He said, "Take it." I didn't realize that, but in that they had that tendency. So you have to be careful if there's a person that you might hint to something that they would give it to you. Extortion is to speak about the faults of great miserliness and the like for the sake of gain. Extortion. Not sure. I'm not sure how that's called extortion. The faults of great miserliness for the like of seeking gain. In other words, telling people that there's great virtue in giving with a kind of intent of making them feel miserable if they don't give. Seeking gain from gain is to seek gain by praising in the presence of another what one has previously obtained, saying, previously, Uncle Charlie gave me, a go-kart, or gave me a car, a bicycle or something, with the hope that they will give you something better. I don't see it exactly like that. Seeking gain from gain, praising in the presence of another what one has previously obtained, saying previously so-and-so gave me such and such. I see it more as giving something small with the anticipation of receiving something big in return. In brief, without guarding the stipulated boundaries of the trainings, even wandering to ask for alms in a village out of attachment to gain and honor. So what would be the attachment to gain? Would be the attachment to getting food, or the attachment to being recognized as a true mendicant or something like that. So without guarding the stipulated boundaries of the trainings, that means without keeping your vows exactly, doing it just for sustenance, wandering in a village to ask for alms out of attachment to gain and honors is taught to be wrong livelihood. Therefore, if you do not wish to be defiled by wrong livelihood, do not seek to ingratiate yourself to others, and protect without duplicity the stipulated boundaries of the Vinaya in a place of solitude. Does that make sense? Too wordy? Alex, does that make sense?
I think so.
Okay, good short answer. Okay. So then, dissimulation, the counterpart. Here, as Ida had said, dissimulation, something like that. Dishonesty is another way of saying it. What is dissimulation? From the Abhidharma Kosha, not from the Abhidharma Samuccaya. It's compendium of knowledge. Oh, wait, compendium of knowledge. No, there's treasury of knowledge. Yeah, this is the Abhidharma Samuccaya. What is dissimulation? It commits faults due to excessive attachment to gain and honor, and is involved with attachment and ignorance. It has the function of hindering the acquisition of perfect instructions. Well, let's see. As has been said above, it is an awareness that wishes to hide one's faults, not revealing them to others through the force of attachment to gain and honor. Nowadays, hiding one's faults, we act smart and clever if we can get away with it. But going by the yardstick of the Dharma, we have deceived ourselves. Regarding this, the Bodhisattva Charyavatara says, I am constantly dwelling in the presence of all the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas who are endowed with unobscured vision. By thinking in this way, I shall likewise develop a sense of shame, respect, and fear. So in other words, you will not dissimulate, you will not be dishonest if you recognize that the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, your gurus, with their clairvoyance, know what you're saying, and they would feel, their minds would feel disappointment in knowing what you've done. Let me read you from the other text here what he says: dissimulation or dishonesty. Dishonesty is a mental factor that when one is overly attached to respect and material gain, our text says gain and honor, right? Same, just different way of translating that. Respect means honor, and gain, material gain. Out of over attachment to those, one wishes to confuse others by keeping one's own faults unknown from them. It has the function of not giving a clear response to questions, and out of causing an interference to obtaining properly directed service. A little slightly different take on it here. So, for instance, if someone asks a question, Dharma question, and you kind of dissimulate, you say, well, you can find it in the scriptures of this. You don't want to explain that you don't know the answer. That would be called dissimulation also. Both pretension and dishonesty, both, what did we call it? The first one, deceit and dissimulation, are similar in that they wish to convey a false image of oneself to others. Superficially, they seem to cheat and deceive others, but in reality, they only cheat and deceive oneself. There are two aspects of dishonesty, one that arises out of attachment and one that arises out of bewilderment. Okay? So here, the discussion in our text says, since the two, deceit and dissimulation, hinder the acquisition of perfect instructions in this life and produce various kinds of undesirable consequences in future lives, such as not meeting with the great vehicle spiritual guides, not gaining perfect instructions, and so forth. Deceit and dissimulation are enumerated among the 4 black dharmas in the Questions of Kashyapya. There's I guess it's either a sutra or a chapter of a larger sutra. I don't know. Does anyone know, Bob? Do you know Questions of Kashyapya? Is that the chapter of one of the larger sutras? Does it ring a bell? I'd ask Shanka, but Christine knows. No. She don't know.
No, I have a question when you're done.
Okay. Okay. When I'm done, what's that? So when it's talking about it hinders the acquisition of perfect instructions in this life, you might think, how does dissimulation do that? You create the karma to not meet spiritual guides in that way if you have that state of mind. So that prevents you from receiving perfect instructions, meeting spiritual guides, and so forth. Yeah, Christine, what was your question?
Oh, thank you, Venerable George. So it kind of goes back to deceit as well. But so my question is, what would be an honest way to compliment someone? You know, like, or in Buddhism, would you like never compliment someone because it would always have, you know, is there any way to do that?
Well, yeah, some Tibetan lamas are very hard case. They would never, you know, especially Asian Chinese, they would never compliment someone.
Saying that it's behind it or some sort of.
Well, like very rarely, like Lama Zopa Rinpoche very rarely compliments someone. You know, sort of the Asian thing, even if your son or daughter has done amazing things, you know, they're never good enough. You know, it's not so much that you really have that state of mind, you project that state of mind to others, you know, my son is a failure or this or that, you know. I think you can, you definitely, to encourage the minds of others who are depressed or feeling, you know, inadequate or with low self-esteem, to complement their qualities is skillful means, you know, to help them to be able to practice, to be happy, and so forth. How are we doing? Any questions? Bob, you're scratching your head.
I have one more question.
Oh, yeah, okay.
So what about as a professional, when, you know, I am a professional and I'm asked questions a lot, you know, and I'm supposed to know the answer kind of thing. And it's not like I intentionally deceive people, but I mean, like there's this fine line between like, well, I mean, I'm sitting here going, wow, like I do all these things and they seem to like be muddy, you know, like, I mean, truthfully, I mean, I'm just being truthful. It's not like I want to deceive people, but, you know, as a professional, there's this fine line between you're supposed to know and do I know and should I say I don't know, and
well, you can say I'll check up.
I'll check up.
You know, I'm not sure right now. Let me do some research or something like that.
Yeah, that might be better sometimes rather than trying to know, because I feel like I want to know and I should know, and maybe
well,
sometimes
you can say, I don't know if this will answer your question, but from my understanding, it's like this.
Okay.
But there may be something more deep there, and if you want, I can do a little research on that.
On it. Yeah, these are so refined. You know, it's
Yeah. So interesting that these two, what did we say, are among the five, the four black dharmas in the questions of Kashyapya. Does anyone know the other two? I don't.
I don't know what they are, but I put the link to
Was
the
it?
30 questions. I put the link in the text.
Oh, there's a link to the four black dharmas?
It could be in there. I didn't read the whole thing. I'm paying attention to you, but there's a good article in the text.
Okay. Okay, we'll check that out. Thank you for that. That's very good.
I can give you the list. I didn't know it. I had to look it up.
Okay, what is it?
Deceiving your guru or a holy being,
Right?
feeling misplaced regret, criticizing or abusing a holy person, and cheating others.
So the first and the fourth would sound like these two, right? Somehow. So these would be hindrances to, you know, receiving teachings and practicing Dharma in its entirety. Good. Yeah. So you can do a little research about that through Donnie's link and maybe Googling it otherwise. So the next one, haughtiness, or maybe inflation. I don't know. Gyakpa. Gyakpa means, usually in the definition of pride, there's the word gyakpa means like an inflated. Regarding haughtiness, the Abhidhamma Samachaya says, What is haughtiness? It is joy and mental happiness upon seeing one's own good health, youth, signs of long life, or continued contaminated success. Meaning it's contaminated actions, and is involved with attachment. It has the function of acting as a support for all the root afflictions and secondary afflictions. As is said above, it is a puffing up of the mind due to joy and mental happiness upon observing one's own good health, prosperity, and so forth. Like the smile the Hollywood stars have on the when they're receiving the award or something like that, the sort of happiness, internal happiness that's one is so great. It has the function of acting as a support for all the root afflictions. As has been said above, is a puffing of the mind due to joy and mental happiness upon observing one's own good health, prosperity, and so forth. Since it produces all afflictions, it acts as the root of non-conscientiousness. So conscientiousness, remember, is a state of mind that is, what did Bob call it? You liked what, carefulness, Bob? Conscientious, something like that.
Something like that. I forget. It was something else. It was something like heedfulness.
Heedfulness, okay.
So heedfulness, that's right.
Being heedful or careful not to engage in any activity. So if you're so full of yourself that you're great, that acts as the root of non-conscientiousness. You're not going to worry about being careful about things because things are going well. The exhortation to exceptional resolve, another famous Buddhist text says, this haughtiness is the root of all non-conscientiousness. Do not deride an inferior, fully ordained monk. You will not attain liberation in an eon if you do. This is the sequence in this teaching. I'm not sure what that means. So haughtiness can lead to being non-conscientious, deriding a inferior non or fully ordained monk. In other words, if you're a fully ordained monk and you deride others as for their lack of application of keeping their vows and so forth, you create the karma that will be an impediment to achieving nirvana. Put that off for even an eon and so forth. In the letter to a friend, Nagarjuna's famous text, look upon haughtiness on account of youth or greatness of lineage, physique, learning, or power as an enemy. So see haughtiness as an enemy if you develop haughtiness as a result of your youthfulness. It's a very common thing you see in the movies, maybe in real life too, when people say, look at that old guy, that old girl. Do you ever encounter that in the world? Do you see that either in your own life or in movies and so forth? Haughtiness is on account of one's own youth, deriding others that are old. Greatness, one's own greatness of lineage, one's high family. You put down others because they're not a Rockefeller or a Rothschild or something like that. Physique, you've got washboard abs, but other people are flabby or whatever. Your own learning, putting down others because you know more than they, or your power. See that kind of haughtiness as an enemy. Yeah, Christine.
What's the difference between haughtiness and pride?
So haughtiness is similar to pride. Let me see what the other text says here. We're talking about this said it's associated with attachment, right? Bewilderment, self-satisfaction. I think here he's calling it, Geshe Rapton's text calls it self-satisfaction. let me just make sure. Gyapa. Self-satisfaction. Gyapa, yeah. So self-satisfaction is a mental factor that being attentive to the marks of good fortune one possesses brings the mind under its influence and produces a false sense of confidence. It has the function of giving rise to and being in accordance with all the other afflictions, as well as interfering with the attainment of any higher qualities. Self-satisfaction, or what do we call it, haughtiness, produces a false sense of haughtiness through considering the superiority of our race, physical appearance, learning, youth, or authority over others. However, it is not necessarily unwholesome to be aware of the good qualities we have. What we must do is to avoid to overvalue them and conceitedly boast to others about them. This mental factor is very liable to give rise to pride, self-importance. So this is not quite pride, just when you're feeling complacent or self-satisfied, and it can lead to pride or self-importance. Yeah, Bob.
Yeah, I think the difference is that pride has to do with feeling superiority, superior to somebody. So it has that notion, I'm better than you are. Whereas this just seems to be, feeling really good about your good qualities.
Right. Well, you remember there are the 7 divisions of pride. So if you go through some of them might be more similar to this, but I agree with you that pride is an intensification of this. This is something that can lead to that. Okay. So then, harmfulness. Here it says nampar sewa. Where do we know that from? When we talked about non-harmfulness, what was that? What is the Sanskrit word for that?
Ahimsa, right?
Ahimsa. Ahimsa, right? Isn't that what Gandhi was famous for saying, non-violence and so forth?
Yeah.
So here you could call it violence rather than harmfulness. Regarding harmfulness or violence, the Abhidharma Samachaya says, what is it? It is involved with anger. It is non-benevolence, non-kindness, non-compassion, and non-mercy. It has the function of harming others. If you have that state of mind, when I talked in one of the other classes about the antidotes to anger, the 4 famous antidotes by the Kadampa Geshis to anger. Do you remember what some of you were in those classes? The arrow and the target, compassion, wisdom, and guru. So compassion generally means it is to overcome this kind of harmfulness that thinks it's okay to harm others. This state of mind thinks, yeah, others, what do we say in the world? They needed that. You do something and someone is aghast that you've hurt someone or hurt someone's feelings, or you put them down, and they needed that, as though, with this state of mind that's lacking benevolence, lacking compassion, lacking mercy, it's just ready to either harm verbally or physically others. It has the function of harming others. As is said above, it is a wish bereft of benevolence to harm sentient beings. So a wish. There's one politician who was president recently who seems to have that kind of, when you think about them, they wish to harm others. Hence, here the synonym non-benevolent and so forth in the citation above are explained in the commentaries as follows. Since it is a wish to harm by oneself, it is non-benevolence. Since it is a wish to engage others in harming, it is non-compassion. And since it is rejoicing upon seeing or hearing others acting to harm, it is non-mercy. It is simply to be understood that its function is, that's its function. Its function is as stated above. Okay. Non-shame. Remember, we talked about shame and embarrassment as virtuous mental factors. Now their opposites are among the 20 secondary mental factors here. The delusions, non-shame, ngosa meba. Abhidharma Samachaya says, what is non-shame? It is a non-avoidance of misdeeds on account of oneself. So you don't avoid misdeeds on account of oneself. Shame would be on account of oneself, taking oneself as the reason to avoid non-virtuous actions, thinking of the karma will come back to me or so forth. Here it is a non-avoidance of misdeeds on account of oneself and is involved with attachment, hatred, and ignorance. It has the function of assisting all root afflictions and secondary afflictions. As is said above, it is an awareness that does not avoid misdeed on account of either oneself or the Dharma. For example, if a fully ordained monk encounters an intoxicant and avoids a misdeed on account of himself, thinking, drinking this intoxicant is not something I should do, then that is shame. The opposite of this is non-shame. So given the opportunity to involve oneself with some negative action, some misdeed, that may be naturally negative or maybe negative because you've taken a vow to avoid it. If you don't avoid that, what do we say here? The opposite of this is non-shame. Drinking this intoxicant is not something I should do. This is shame. So not thinking this is not something I should not do. Taking it, smoking a joint or shooting up with heroin or whatever. What is it? Snorting a line of cocaine or something. Not thinking this is not something I should not do. That is non-shame. So that creates negative karma. Non-embarrassment, telmeba. Regarding non-embarrassment, Abhidharma Samachaya says, what is it? It is non-avoidance of misdeeds on account of others and is involved with attachment, hatred, and ignorance. It has the function of assisting all the root afflictions and secondary afflictions. As is said above, it is an awareness that does not avoid faults because of others, on account of others. If one, when about to engage in a misdeed, avoids the misdeed on account of others, thinking, if the teacher and the clairvoyant gods were to become displeased and I were to be despised by others, this would be unfitting, then this is embarrassment. The opposite of this is non-embarrassment. So not even taking that into account or thinking, doesn't matter. One extreme would be, it doesn't matter what others think, the community or the gurus or the omniscient gods, not the omniscient gods, the clairvoyant gods. So certain gods know with their clairvoyance what we are thinking and doing. Not taking them into account and thinking I can do this, this is non-embarrassment. So then the discussion of this pair, non-embarrassment and non-shame and non-embarrassment. Precious Garland, non-shame and non-embarrassment are respectively the lack of avoidance on account of oneself and others. Very short definition. The Bodhisattva Grounds, text by Asanga, says, Shame is the restraint when a bodhisattva knows that committing misdeeds is not something he should do, he or she should do. Embarrassment is that very restraint due to fear of and respect for others. So non-shame and non-embarrassment assist all afflictions and act as the cause of all misdeeds. For if the wish to avoid misdeeds is absent, so remember, shame and embarrassment, the positive, virtuous mental factors, the wish to avoid misdeeds. If the wish to avoid misdeeds is absent, if one has no shame or embarrassment, one will not be able to guard against them. Therefore, non-shame and non-embarrassment have been taught in both the upper and lower knowledges, Abhidharmas, the Abhidharma Kosha, lower one, and the Abhidharma Samuccaya, the upper Abhidharma, they're taught as being concomitant with all non-virtuous minds. So you're just freewheeling. You have no constraints. Although there appears much to be explained with regard to this, here I shall not elaborate further. Okay? Questions? Then lethargy, mukba, could be also called darkness. Mukba sometimes just means darkness. Let's see what we call it. Dullness. I think our text, Geshe-Raptin's text calls it dullness. Mukba, yeah. So it's interesting. It's good if you read other texts to look at the appendix, or if they have a kind of, what do they call it at the end, where they get the equivalent of glossary, of these terms to find out what words are being used. You may know it with a different name. Here, lethargy or dullness. Abhidharma Samuccaya says, what is it? It is an unserviceability of the mind. Unserviceability of the mind. You're just like, I've been taking Cipro, this antibiotic, for a second urinary tract infection I just got as a result of radiation. And boy, that made me really dull, lethargic, it's just like the mind, especially dullness. What is lethargy or dullness? It is an unserviceability of the mind. So lethargy sometimes kind of is an unserviceability of the body, right? Here, maybe dullness is better. Unserviceability of the mind and is involved with ignorance. It has the function of assisting all the root afflictions and secondary afflictions. When you're overcome with dullness, to meditate on the clear light nature of your mind, there are various things, like when you're trying to meditate on shamatha, if your mind becomes dull, you can also, when lethargy arises, you can imagine your mind as a little sesame seed at your heart chakra, and by saying the syllable pet, the Tibetans say pay, but in Sanskrit it's pet. You imagine shooting that out the crown of out of your head, going up the central channel, out the crown of your head, into space, where it abides up in clear space, and everything's clear, and that can help to overcome that. In worst case of dullness, the best thing to do is just to take off some of the clothing, so your arms have some your armpits don't become hot or warm, or just get up and take a shower, cold shower. That can help too.
I tried the pear trick in a subway, and I think in the London, either the London Underground or I was in Paris. I don't remember where I was, Rome maybe. It did work actually.
It probably scared the.
Well, it was relatively empty. It was relatively empty.
Oh, okay. I can imagine the other. Where was it, in Germany? You said?
No, it was either Rome or London. I can't remember which, you know.
You can just imagine the other people. First thing. Lethargy. So for the precious garland, it says, well, before that, just as been said above, it is a heaviness and unserviceability of the body and mind. Our text didn't say it is an unserviceability of the body, the Abhidharma Samachaya. It says unserviceability of the mind, but here it's extending that to unserviceability of the body and mind, and is a factor of ignorance. Precious Garland says lethargy is a state of inactivity due to heaviness of body and mind. So that's the general take. It includes also being lethargic in body. The Abhidharma Kosha, treasury, kosha means treasury. That kosha sometimes where you put the sword is the sheath. So it's a treasury within which you put things. Abhidharma Kosha says, what is lethargy? It is a heaviness of the body and a heaviness of the mind. It is an unserviceability of the body and an unserviceability of the mind. Remember what unserviceability or serviceability means? Stephen, do you have a feeling for that?
Well, what popped into my mind, Venerable George, was pliancy.
Yeah, so pliancy is a supreme serviceability of the mind and body. There are two kinds of pliancy, physical pliancy and mental pliancy. So here, lethargy is the opposite of that. What you are overcoming. The Lamrim Chemo, Great Exposition of the Stages of the Path, it also explains it in this way. Its function is specified as assisting all root afflictions and secondary afflictions. If your mind is not agile, is not serviceable, you're just like dull, the afflictions are assisted because they require some ability to counter them, to subdue their increase. It is specified as assisting all root afflictions and secondary afflictions because all afflictions will increase in dependence on lethargy. So think about that. If your mind is lethargic, if your body, well, mainly your mind, but if your body and mind are lethargic, it says all afflictions will increase in dependence on that. Does that make sense? If your mind is lethargic, if your mind is dull, you can't see truth, so that acts to assist. Here it says will increase, or maybe assist the increase in dependence on lethargy. In this vein, the exhortation to exceptional resolve, this text that was mentioned before, says, phlegm, wind, and bile occur to a great extent in the bodies of those who take joy in sleep and lethargy. Their constituents are in disorder. Phlegm, wind, and bile. Aren't those the three main in the Tibetan medical? Who's any of you read about Tibetan medicine, or those are the three main things that cause, because of their imbalance. We all have phlegm to a certain degree. We all have bile to a certain degree. We all have wind to a certain degree. But when they become unbalanced, here it says their constituents are in disorder. For those who take joy in lethargy and sleep, their stomachs are unclean due to a bad diet. Their bodies are heavy and their complexions unhealthy. Even their speech is slurred. That sounds like me. Lethargians who take joy in lethargy and sleep. Those who take joy in lethargy and sleep are confused, and their aspirations for the Dharma degenerate. Yeah, if you're lethargic, if your mind is dull, the childish completely degenerate from all excellent qualities. Their wholesomeness degenerates and they proceed to darkness. Yeah, Bob.
Actually, Engel's text on the Vasubandhu text actually has some interesting different ways of describing it. It has some words which I think are helpful. First of all, he calls it torpor.
Torpor, yeah.
So, and he says it's an unfitness and immobility of the mind. And he says that he says that the mind, it causes the mind to become dull and motionless, that is, to be unable to perceive an object. And then actually in a footnote, it's very helpful. He talks about it being, he says that one of the Tibetan terms, it actually literally means stupid, but he says that it's more correctly a lack of vitality and alertness. So lacking energy to do something, and also not being alertness, not paying, you're so dull, you don't pay attention and notice things.
Yeah, thank you for that, Bob. Lorraine, what do you think?
Yes, I've actually had been dealing with some lethargy lately because I've had a stomach bug, so I'm kind of dealing with that, but also, and it is clouding my ability to think straight. But I'm hearing all this and thinking it sounds more like what you're getting at is willful ignorance. Like the people who refuse to, they like their lethargy and they like their dullness so much that if they're confronted with anything that wants to unseat that, they defend it.
That could be, definitely. But this is something that can occur even when you're trying to practice. Say, for instance, when you're trying to develop tranquil abiding, shamatha, you will notice before the mind actually begins to sink, which is one of the the main obstacles to developing, when the mind loses its apprehension of the object and the clarity of the object. Those are the defining sort of the important qualities of sinking. Before that occurs, mukpa, or what do we call it here, darkness or torpor occurs. So the mind becomes a little bit dark, and then the mind begins to, that's sort of a prelude to that. So here, that mental factor, torpor or darkness, or what did we call it here? What's our text called? Lethargy. That is followed by excitement, the next mental, one of the 20 secondary mental afflictions. Why? Because they're both involved in as I want to say hindrances to developing single-pointed concentration. The lethargy is a precursor to sinking, which is the main thing. Excitement here is a kind of scattering, but there's another mental factor later called scattering, which is the mind losing its object due to general causes. Here, what is excitement? Abhidharma Samachaya says it is an unpeacefulness of the mind that subsequently engages an attractive cause. It has the function of hindering calm abiding. So excitement is the counterpart of, in the antidotes, or say the hindrances to developing single-pointed concentration, tranquil abiding. Sinking is one that was more related to lethargy. Lethargy is a precursor of that. Here, excitement is a state of mind that is attracted to something which you find pleasing. So the mind easily goes to something that is pleasing. It's related with attachment and so forth. It is an unpeacefulness of the mind that subsequently engages in an attractive cause. I'm not sure, I'll have to look at the Tibetan. I'm not sure what that means. Engages in an attractive cause. Might be something there. It has the function of hindering calm abiding. As is said above, so this is commentary, Kachin Yeshe Gelson's commentary to the Abhidharma Samachaya. It is an awareness that upon observing the attributes of the desire realm previously experienced, mentally scatters outward to them and engages them with craving. Right? So scattering, or I can't remember the other word, wandering mind, is when you lose the object due to some general kind of thought, even anger and so forth. You're so overcome with anger, but those things can be subdued in general. What's more pernicious is excitement, this particular state of mind, which kind of excited about something is thinking about something that's attractive, multitasking. In other words, you're losing the object you're trying to concentrate on, and you go off to something else. So the Precious Garland says, excitement is an unpeacefulness of the body and mind. Likewise, a discussion of the five aggregates, the text that Bob's got there in front of him and is referring to before, this one that Art Engels translated, that Vasubandhu wrote. That text also, by the way, if you get that, that also has the commentary by Stiramati to Vasubandhu. Stiramati was one of Vasubandhu's students. What is excite? Wait a second, what did I get? Yeah, five aggregates. What is excitement? It is an unpeacefulness of mind. Well, you can have, it doesn't really delineate it that much because all of the kleshas and the secondary kleshas cause the mind to become unpeaceful. These points are taught in the Lanrim Shemel, great exposition of the stages of the path. Its object of observation is a pleasant and attractive object. So you're trying to concentrate on one thing, and there's maybe a thought cloud coming in your mind, you know, your boyfriend or your girlfriend or pizza or, you know, stir-fried chicken or whatever, pizza. Its subjective aspect is an unpeacefulness of the mind that is scattered outward, so away from the object you're trying to concentrate on. It engages its object with the aspect of craving. It has the function of hindering the mind from abiding on the object, on an object of observation. So it doesn't occur only when you're trying to develop single-pointed concentration, only when you're trying to develop shamatha. In general, your mind can be excited, you know, just like at Christmas, you know, the kids, Santa Claus, the presents. I saw some video yesterday with some fellow was acting as Santa Claus and all the kids are getting excited, right? Because of craving. So qualm. You know what a qualm is? We talked about this before. What is a qualm, Stephen?
It might be, thank you, Venerable George, it might be a doubt or a question in your mind or an uncertainty about something.
Yeah, exactly. So, you know, so the qualm are all outward scatterings of the mind excitement when your mind jumps to something else. Response, I do not hold it to be so. Generally, it's not the Buddhist position. Excitement is involved with attachment, but the mind is frequently distracted to objects by way of afflictions other than attachment. The mind even scatters to non-afflicted, virtuous objects of observation. So for instance, you're trying to concentrate on Buddha Shakyamuni, but then your mind scatters off to Tara. That's not excitement. Hence, not all scatterings of the mind are excitement. Are we all together here? Okay, David's having a sandwich. Okay. I'm teasing. Non-faith, next one, non-faith. Remember of the virtuous, there you are. You swallowed quickly.
I did.
Yeah. I'm just teasing. It's something that I would do. I would turn off if I was going off. So non-faith. Of the virtuous mental factors, the first one wasn't in our list, faith, you know, most important virtuous mental factor. Now, non-virtuous among the secondary delusions is non-faith. What is it? From the Abhidharma Samachaya all the time. It is a non-conviction, non-clarity, non-wishing of the mind with respect to virtuous phenomena and is involved with ignorance. it has the function of acting as a support for laziness. Remember when we talked about single shamatha developing, the first fault of developing it is laziness, acting as a support for laziness, non-faith. So the first fault is laziness. The antidote to that is to develop faith and the other factors that bring your mind elevated to have energy and enthusiastic perseverance for developing single point concentration. So it is a non-conviction, non-clarity, and non-wishing. Remember the three divisions of faith. So these are the opposites of those. We had faith of conviction, lucid faith or clear faith, and aspirational faith, or here it's so wishing faith. So these are the opposites of that. As is said above, it is the discordant class of faith. Discordant class, this is sort of technical. Maybe you would prefer something more colloquial. I asked you before if you understood that means. It means they're kind of opposite. They act in discordance with one another. It is the discordant class of faith and is involved with ignorance. It is three types: non-faith of non-conviction, which is non-conviction in actions and their results and so forth. The discordant class of the faith of conviction. Easy. Non-faith of non-clarity is a mental dislike with respect to possessors of excellent qualities, such as the three jewels. It is the discordant class of the faith of clarity. So when you have the lucid faith or faith of clarity, your mind becomes lucid and clear out of perceiving the good qualities of the gurus, the Buddhas, bodhisattvas, the Dharma, and so forth. Here is the opposite of that. Dislike with respect to, instead of feeling, wow, that's great, and think, Buddhas, bodhisattvas, Dalai Lama, gurus, Non-faith of non-wishing and non-seeking of liberation and so forth is the discordant class of wishing faith. Okay. It is simply to be understood that its function is as stated above. That doesn't help too much. Okay. Then laziness, lelo. Very common, even colloquial Tibetan term. You're very lazy. What is laziness? It is a non-enthusiasm of the mind engendered by the comfort of lying down. I'm feeling that a lot lately with my Cipro antibiotic and just in general laziness. Non-enthusiasm of the mind engendered by the comfort of lying down, reclining on one side, well, also on your back, and slouching about, and is involved with ignorance. It has the function of hindering application to the class of virtue. As is said above, it is a non-enthusiasm of the mind for virtue due to habit of lying down and so forth. Laziness causes the entire class of virtue to degenerate. So here it says close placement of mindfulness. Sadharma smriti upasthana. So this in the Pali Canon is generally called the Satipatthana Sutra. Instead of saying smriti, which is the Sanskrit for mindfulness, they say sati, and instead of saying upasthana, they say patana, satipatthana. So in that sutra, it says the one basis for afflictions is laziness. Who has it? Whenever laziness is present, all dharma is absent. So here we're talking at a particular variety of laziness, not talking about, generally when you talk about laziness, you talk about the laziness of procrastination and the laziness of attachment to non-virtue and so forth. Let me see, what does he call it here? It's human faithless. Laziness. Laziness is a mental factor that having firmly grasped an object offering temporary happiness, like lying down, either does not want to do anything wholesome, or, although wanting to, is faint-hearted. You know, you'd like to do something virtuous, but faint-hearted, you could put it off. It has the function of causing the power of enthusiasm to decrease. It acts as the basis for generation of wholesome tendencies already assumed, as well as for the prevention of any fresh production of virtue. This negative mental factor is what is overcome by enthusiasm. When we talk about enthusiastic perseverance, effort, this is what is overcome by that. It has three major divisions. Its three major divisions have already been explained in the section on dealing with enthusiasm, or you can check in effort. So it does have these three divisions. However, in addition to these three divisions, we can add three more. Laziness, that from the very outset regards practice of Dharma as unnecessary. I've got my computer glasses on, that's why I'm having trouble reading. I have to change glasses here. Laziness, that from the very outset regards the practice of Dharma as unnecessary. Procrastinating laziness, which, although realizing that one is able to practice Dharma, considers there to be no time now. You know, I'm busy. You know, putting off the practice of Dharma. And laziness, destructive laziness, that although seeing the necessity of practice now, is attracted to unwholesome activity. Okay? So then, non-conscientiousness. Yeah, remember when we talked about the virtuous mental factors, we had shame and embarrassment, and then later in the list, conscientiousness, which is general. Now this is non-conscientiousness, bhakti-mepa. Regarding non-conscientiousness, the Abhidharma Samachaya says, what is it? It is abiding with attachment, hatred, and ignorance, as well as laziness. It is a non-cultivation of virtuous qualities. Non-conscientiousness. It is a non-cultivation of virtuous qualities, a non-guarding of the mind against contaminated phenomena. It has the function of acting as a support for the increase of non-virtue and the decrease of virtue. So non-conscientiousness doesn't cultivate virtue, has no interest in cultivating virtue, and it doesn't guard the mind from non-virtue. As stated above, this is Kachin Yeshi Gelson's commentary again, it is awareness that not guarding the mind against the hosts of afflictions and misdeeds gives in to relaxation, or maybe laziness, relax. In this regard, so the mind is not watching carefully, not heedful, as Babu said. As been said above, it is an awareness that not guarding the mind against the host of afflictions and misdeeds gives rise to relaxation. Sorry, I said that. Discussion of the five aggregates, the text that Bob is referring to there again and again. What is it? It is a non-guarding of the mind against afflictions due to attachment, hatred, ignorance, or laziness, and is a non-cultivation of virtue. So it doesn't guard from negativities, and it doesn't act to cultivate virtue. It is simply to be understood as its function, or maybe that is simply to be understood as its function. Forgetfulness. So when we try to cultivate mindfulness, the main thing that mindfulness is doing is to prevent forgetfulness. What is forgetfulness? It is a mindfulness that is concomitant with afflictions. Huh? It is a mindfulness that is concomitant with afflictions. It has the function of acting as a support for distraction. It is a mindfulness. Okay, so I'll have to understand this from the commentary. He says, as is said above, it is a knower that is an unclear mind. So would have the mukpa that we talked about above, the darkness of mind or the torpor. It is an unclear mind and forgetful with respect to virtue on account of mindfulness of an object of observation of afflictions. Similarly, the discussion of the five aggregates also explains forgetfulness to be an afflicted mindfulness. Afflicted mindfulness, whereby an unclear, forgetful, virtuous mind should be called forgetfulness. Afflicted mindfulness. Anyone have a take on that? Bob, Shanka, or Nadine, Stephen, what do you think? Well, Bob, you go first.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because he, again, in this text by Engel, he says, he talks about it, those whose recollection is accompanied by a mental affliction, such as a desire, are only able to recall objects of desire, such as attractive women. They cannot maintain any clarity of mind with regard to virtuous objects. Therefore, clouded recollection is the failure to maintain a state of recollection in the mind of such virtuous objects as excellent spiritual instruction, and thus the mind becomes clouded with regard to that object. So he seems to be saying two things. One is you remember all of the afflicted objects, and you have a clouded recollection of the virtuous objects.
Yeah, thank you for that. That helps. So it is a mindfulness that is concomitant with afflictions. So it is categorized, even though forgetfulness is usually said to be the, you can say the discordant class of mindfulness. Here it's said to be a mindfulness. It is mindfulness that is concomitant with the afflictions. It has the function of acting as a support for distraction. However, since the objects of observation of the afflictions, pleasant and unpleasant characteristics and so forth, do not arise as objects of awareness of such a virtuous mind, perhaps it should not be posited as forgetfulness. Forgetfulness acts as a support for distraction because in dependence on afflicted mindfulness, the mind will be distracted to an object of observation of the afflictions. Forgetfulness acts as a support for distraction because in dependence on afflicted mindfulness, which is what he's defining forgetfulness to be, the mind will be distracted to an object of observation of the afflictions. So one would say that this is a cause of both scattering in general and of excitement. Doris, what's your thought there?
My qualm.
What's your qualm? Yeah.
So, and there's some opposites here that I'll just have to, work out in my brain later, in my mind, sorry. But should it say sort of in the top part of that paragraph, whereby an unclear, forgetful, virtuous mind? Should it say virtuous there?
So read this a little more around that to find this part you're talking about.
Okay, just under the part, the italics where it says discussion of the five aggregates.
Right. Uh-huh.
The sentence below that, or the line below that, it says whereby an unclear, forgetful, virtuous mind. My mind goes in a knot thinking that it should say non-virtuous, because aren't we talking afflicted?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that's a quotation from the Five Aggregates. Bob, you've got Five Aggregates there. Do you see that? Well, it says a discussion. Yeah, discussion of the Five Aggregates. That's the text that Art Engel translated there. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So what the it's actually a short paragraph. I'll give the whole thing for the Vasa bondage thing. It says from the very beginning, with regard to the phrase afflicted recollection, which is what he calls it. So he calls it. So he uses clouded or afflicted recollection for the term for this. With regard to the phrase afflicted recollection, the term afflicted means a form of recollection that is concomitant with a mental affliction. So the same as we had before. Concerning the phrase a lack of clarity with regard to virtue, this means that the recollection that is concomitant with a mental affliction does not have a different object from that which is held by the mental affliction. So it holds, therefore the mind is not able to develop clarity with regard to a virtuous object. Its action is to provide support for distraction. So to me, it seems like this, again, it seems to be the sort of thing that this is leading you to remember all the afflicted objects and to be clouded, have a clouded memory of the virtuous objects.
Mm-hmm. So the phrase that Doris was asking about, whereby an unclear, forgetful, virtuous mind should be called forgetfulness. She was wondering whether it should be an unclear, forgetful, non-virtuous mind should be called forgetfulness, because forgetfulness is one of the secondary mental afflictions, right? So it is not all the affliction, not all of the secondary kleshas, not all kleshas, for instance, are non-virtuous, right? Remember when we talked about grasping to true existence, the view of the transitory collection or ignorance, they are not necessarily non-virtuous because they are present even when we create virtuous actions. So I'm not sure here. I will try to practice what I've preached.
I mean, here it's saying that you're talking about the bottom of page 79, where it says the discussion of the five aggregates.
No, I'm
also explain.
No, in a page at the bottom of page, near the bottom of page 81.
Oh, wait.
What is forgetfulness? As is said above, then the commentary says, as has been said above, it is a knower that is unclear mind and forgetful with respect to virtue. Then it says, similarly, a discussion of the five aggregates also explains forgetfulness to be an afflicted mindfulness, whereby an unclear, forgetful, virtuous mind should be called forgetfulness.
Oh, that's different than my text.
Yeah,
it's
different.
Very odd. My text says, whereby a forgetting of virtue within mental and clarity is called forgetfulness. And that's
Oh,
what
you mean,
is.
So the text that I have, you have a different translation.
Yes.
Maybe she revised it. Okay, that's good to know.
So she says a forgetting of virtue, and that's what this forgetfulness is. It's a forgetting of virtue within mental and clarity.
Okay, so she revised from the copy that I have. She revised it, which makes more sense. And maybe
and that agrees with Engel's thing.
And
it's like so in Engel's thing, you forget virtuous minds, or you're unclear about virtuous minds.
Right, and
so that's what
Doris's qualm also. So it's not a forgetful, virtuous mind, but it is unclear mind that forgets virtue, that is forgetful of virtue. Does that help, Doris?
Yes, I forgot that I'm using the previous version because it's all my notes are attached to it. I forgot that
She had a revision. Yeah.
the updated version.
Right. Thank
But
you
at
for
least I
that.
picked up on it.
Yeah. So so these kinds of, even when you have sort of like something like this that happens, this is what really will leave an imprint in your mind when you think about this in the future. You know, like in the debating courtyard, when you debate about things, even if you have the wrong position at first, something doesn't make sense, in clarifying that, that helps to lead the mind, you know, leave a good impression in the mind of the correct thing. So it is a mind that is forgetful of virtue or forgetting virtue. That helps a lot. So I'll make a point in my own text here to change that. Okay. So I had hoped to finish today. What do you think? Are you going to be bummed out if we have one more class? Who's going to be bummed out? Stephen's going to be bummed out? No, he's not going to be bummed out. I don't know. Karen looks happy, but she's probably, would you guys? Okay. Shanka said, okay. And he's missed several classes of his. He's up for one more class, then that should seal it. So we'll try to finish next time. Any last questions? I want to praise you all for your carefulness and conscientiousness, Bob catching that and Doris catching what seemed obviously to be you know, an erroneous reading from the text that she and I still have. And if those of you who have the chance to get the revised edition, maybe to use that. I didn't still get that revised edition. So let's end with a little dedication again. Little in the sense of being short, but not little in the sense of its importance. We've created some virtuous karma this morning as a result of the virtuous motivation at the beginning. Even if we had to apply effort to generate bodhicitta, it was called effortful bodhicitta, not spontaneous bodhicitta. We had to use reasons to think that we must achieve enlightenment for the welfare of all sentient beings. That itself has created enormous amount of virtue, imprints in the mind. Put that together with the effort of listening with conscientiousness and carefulness and checking and so forth. All the virtue that we created, all the virtue we created in past of this life, in past lives, all the virtue we will create later this life and in future lives, with the clarity of mind now, making a determination. I want that to be the impetus for my continued spiritual realization, spiritual development from life to life, from day to day, year by year, life by life, up to and including enlightenment, all of the stages of the path. May these virtues ripen as the support for that development, not ripening simply in some samsaric happiness that's experienced one and is then gone, but may it become the cause of my development up to and including enlightenment, when I can spontaneously, compassionately, with empathy, alleviate the suffering of all sentient beings by teaching them, by leading them in all of the ways that the omniscient mind can do, blessing their mind streams without error, spontaneously. May these virtues, due to these virtues that I've created, may I quickly become a Guru Buddha and lead each and every sentient being into that very same state. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Venerable George.
I noticed, I'm not sure, I think it was maybe Thursday night, Brian Williams had his sign off on MSNBC. Did anyone watch that? Maybe you're not big fans of Brian Williams. He's been on 30 years, and he was reveling about all of the great guests. And so I want to revel, or what's the correct term? Praise all of the great participants in this course. You who are chewing the tough bones of the Dharma, leaving imprints in your minds for the benefit of others in the future. Thank you very much. See you next week.
Thank you.
Thank you.
very